I'm Andrea Giles, and you're listening to the Heal from Infidelity podcast, episode number 30, When You Feel Betrayed by God, with David Butler. Hello, and welcome to the Heal from Infidelity podcast, where courageous women learn not only to heal from their spouse's betrayal, but to become the boldest, truest, most decisive, and confident versions of themselves ever. If you know there's more for you than the life you're currently living, but don't quite know how to get there, you are in the right place. Stick around to learn how to create a life that will knock your own socks off. Is it possible? It is, and I'm here to show you how. I'm your host, Andrea Giles. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. I have a really special guest that's been in the works for quite some time. And today we're going to be having a discussion about feeling betrayed by God. And the person that I brought on, his name is David Butler. He's an author, a best-selling author, speaker. He is an institute teacher. He teaches religion every single day, works with youth, and has personally made a difference for me. And I'm going to tell a little bit about that. So I first came to know who David is. It's been almost 7 years ago. My first husband had been killed in a car accident. And it was just shortly after he had died. And I was like woken up in the middle of the night with this thought that I needed to go send my son to a camp that our church does called EFY, especially for youth. I got up and most spots were already like long sold out, but I went and looked anyway. And there was one spot open to go to this camp in Rexburg, Idaho. And so I bought the ticket and sent my son, and keeping in mind that this was about 2 weeks after his dad had been killed. So my son came home and had a really like life-changing experience at EFY because of my guest today, David Butler. He was in multiple classes with him and felt so strengthened and so just helped and encouraged during this time, and had some experiences that really spoke to him and helped him to feel healing and feel heard and seen in this time. So fast forward several years, Peter, my son, went on a mission to the Marshall Islands. And while he was on his mission, I was listening to one of David's classes. He's the co-host of an amazing show turned podcast. What do you call it, David? Both?
Yeah.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Who knows, but.
Right. It's called Don't Miss This. It's fantastic. It's a deep study of the scriptures. He's co-host with Emily Bell Freeman. And I was listening to him tell a story about a time when he was teaching a class at EFY, and the subject matter of when really hard things happen in life, when things happen, and how sometimes we are delivered and sometimes we are not. Like sometimes we feel like we're being handed the sword and can feel cut down, and sometimes it can feel like we're being sent an angel. And he talked about a young man in his class named Peter, and how sometimes it can feel like both, that we can feel like we're getting the smack down and being carried by angels at the same time. And as he was talking, you can imagine I had tears just streaming down my face because I knew he was talking about my boy, Peter. And I was so grateful that he had that instruction and help and strength that he needed at that time. And to hear David speak about that, just, you can imagine my son was far, far away serving his mission. And it just meant everything to me to see how far my son had come and how he had been given the help he needed. So with that introduction, I want to bring on David. Thank you so much for being here. David's a busy man and has so many amazing things going on. And I'm really, really grateful that you took the time to come today. So thank you.
Oh, no thanks needed, because that experience, with Peter, he actually taught me my own lesson then. And that's been a sweet memory and experience for me. And I just have, wanted to stay connected to that boy and anybody connected to him, so it's a gift to me, I feel like.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So today we're going to be talking about times that we feel betrayed by God. And David, I reached out to I just reached out to my Facebook audience and asked an open question about times that you have been felt betrayed by God. And I got lots of private messages. I got comments in on my page, and it's a pretty common experience. You probably know this is a pretty common experience. And some of the things that people specifically mentioned as areas where they felt betrayed by God were around spouses' infidelity. As you know, that's where I work, as women who are working through infidelity, infertility, health issues, like major health issues with your children, watching your children be sick, watching your children suffer, having a personal faith crisis, watching a faith crisis of a loved one, personal health issues, ongoing financial struggles, on and on, right? On and on. And so today I just want to talk about your experience as you spend your days in study and in teaching and supporting and helping people. I'm sure this is not a new topic to you because we're all here having this experience. And so I want to ask you, I want to know, like, first of all, have you ever experienced this? Has this been something that you've ever encountered or grappled with?
Yeah. And, not that anybody wants to compare experiences, but I will say I do hear stories that make my heart break because of just their intensity. And it really, I don't know. Who am I to know? Because I only know my own life experiences, but I do look at others and I think you were dealt cards I was not dealt. And I'm only 40. And so, who knows and whatever, but yeah, I in my own ways that were heavy for me, for my capacity and my understanding. Absolutely. I feel like, one thing that I've been thinking about, and I don't know if you're ready to just kind of jump into some thoughts here or not, but
yeah, I am. Let's go.
I was thinking just this week about this, that, where I teach a class about the life of Jesus, just his within our faith tradition. If you remember the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we see the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament is the same God. And so we can learn about his character in both places. And you had a people who lived in first century Palestine at page 1 of the New Testament who felt betrayed by God. For centuries, their identity was, we are the people God set free, that he released us from Egypt, from slavery, from Pharaoh, from all of that intense persecution. That was their identity as a people, But for centuries, they didn't have that. And God had promised them, you will bless all nations, and my presence will be among you, and you will be led by a God who is wonderful, a counselor, a prince of peace. And they did not see those playing out in their lives. And so anyone who feels this feeling of being betrayed by God, like, it would not take very much imagination to feel like, what is it like on page 1 of the New Testament for those people? They were asking the same question that so many of your listeners and clients and friends are asking, and that is, where is that king? Where is he? Now, we know when we read that story that they were watching for the wrong kind of deliverance. And it's easy to see it 2,000 years later, looking back, and just harder to grapple with that in our own experience. But I started thinking this week, in those moments when I'm like, wait a second, where is that king? Mm-hmm. Could I be like them? And maybe I'm expecting the wrong kind of deliverance. Maybe I'm expecting him to be a certain kind of God, and those expectations came from me. And I created how he should deliver and how he should redeem. And like so many in first century, missed him. They missed that he was among them because they were watching for the wrong kind of king. And I started to think about that, how it's like, well, wow, there have been experiences I've had where I would look at it and I would say, well, that was unexpected. That is not how I thought he would respond. That's not how I thought he would intervene. And so I've kind of discovered a new title for Jesus, a new name for Jesus, which is the unexpected Jesus, or an unexpected deliverer. And most of the time, I feel like that's a word that means disappointing, where it's like, oh, I didn't expect that because I expected this over here. So unexpectedness could actually take on a meaning and a feeling of betrayal and disappointment and lackluster and let down. But this took a long time for me to get to this one point, which is the unexpectedness of Jesus can actually be one of the most thrilling parts of his character because of how unexpectedly merciful and kind and long-suffering and good he is. It's unexpected that he would come to some of the places that he's met me in, or that he would come to some of the people that he comes to. It's like, oh, that's also very unexpected. One thing we can't expect from him is that he does deliver and he does redeem. But if we watch and follow the pattern of his life, it rarely happens in the way that people thought it would. Like that is, I think, what we need to teach about him is, it will probably not happen the way that you think. It just, when has it? When does a king come to earth in a barn?
Yeah.
And why does he ride in on Easter week on the back of a donkey and not a war horse? And who wins a battle with 5 stones from the river? And you know what I mean? Like, that's his, I was going to say his MO, but there's probably a more respectful way to say that about him. That is his, is the unexpected deliverer, and there's a lot of thrill in that. There's a lot of thrill in knowing that I can expect deliverance and I can expect to be surprised by the deliverance.
Oh, that's so powerful. That's so beautiful. 2 things that makes me think of. One is that I think relationships in whole, we often set ourselves up for disappointment because we have expectations in our mind about what relationships should look like. A good marriage should look this way. A good child should behave in this way. I am only good if I behave in this way, if I check these boxes, right? And I think that there's so much freedom in letting that go and going and learning about other people, watching other people. And I think when we're able to drop the expectations and actually see people, that's where we see them and know them, really. But like when we really get to see them and know them. And I think it's the same with what you're saying with Jesus Christ, is that when we can put down the check boxes, like I did my check boxes, so where's yours? Like, where's your, Which is a really bizarre relationship to have with anybody, to say, I mean, that is a business relationship. Totally. Transactional.
If I do my part, then you are obligated to do yours. And I do not want that kind of relationship with a father, a mother, a spouse, anyone, a child. I don't want it in any of my intimate relationships. Yeah. I would like it with Wells Fargo.
Perfect.
But that's the only person I want that kind of relationship with.
Yeah. Beautiful. I agree. The other thing that you reminded me of is even the Savior himself, who agreed to do what he said he was going to do. It was really hard for him too. And I mean, even though he knew what he was doing, he knew the cost, he knew where he was headed, he knew he was going to be crucified, he still suffered greatly. Like, he still had moments where he didn't want to do it, where he wanted, like, are you sure? This is tough. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I think anybody who reads the words of Jesus from the cross could translate it as saying, my God, why have you betrayed me?
Yeah.
You know, and if you read the Gospels, Jesus always has it put together, you know, like he is unflustered and he is so calm and he's just put together, steady. You know, they bust in through the temple in the middle of his sermon and drag a half-dressed woman in adultery into, you know what I mean? Like certainly she would have been a spectacle. And his response is just even keel. A man possessed with devils comes running at him. Jesus's question is, hello, what's your name? I mean, it's just, you see him, no matter who or what is happening, he is so, until Gethsemane.
Yep.
And then you watch him collapse in a panic attack. I mean, he loses emotional and he loses all sense of like put togetherness when he goes into that place. And that's the same Jesus on the Mount of Beatitudes with the flowers and the people is the same Jesus in Gethsemane. But sometimes in our moments of betrayal, we need to picture the Gethsemane Jesus instead of maybe the hillside Jesus, because it's like, I actually need that image of who he is, that's the God I need today. I need Gethsemane Jesus today, not necessarily flower Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he's like, he experienced it. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying, like he experienced betrayal in the highest sense,
Yeah. Yep. Another word that I hear is, I feel abandoned, just alone. Like, where is he? Where is he? And what would you say to that?
Well, we talked a little bit beforehand, and you, I think, wrote down some questions that you'd heard from people or some of your own thoughts. And one of them that you said to me was, do you know anyone in Scripture, who's kind of felt that way? And I thought, actually, I can't think of anybody in Scripture who has not experienced those things.
Yeah.
So I don't know where we got this expectation from, but certainly it wasn't from Scripture of that. But all over you find people cry. I just can't think of a single one that does not deal with disappointment, that doesn't deal with some sort of like heartache, that doesn't cry out, my God, where are you? Like, how could you have done this? You just see that. And if you don't see it with a person, it's because someone didn't write down enough of their story.
Yeah.
Like if you look at like Isaac and Rebecca's story in Genesis, it is just this golden, darling little marriage and she has twins, and she just dresses them alike. And anyways, even they have a little bit, at the end, with the two brothers that end up fighting and want to kill each other literally. And you have that. But the first part of it, you're reading it and you're like, well, wouldn't that be nice? And I was like, oh, listen, if I wrote a 1-page summary of your 20s and 30s and 40s, it would look really sweet also.
Right.
Like someone only writes 1 page. It actually looks really darling. You can just include the best parts. And
right.
It's everywhere. It is everywhere throughout.
Yeah. I think as I was thinking about like preparing for talking to you today, a thought that I had is, I think that we, even like growing up, we have the way that we're taught things. And certainly my listeners come from very different backgrounds. Some had more stable homes than others, right? But there's this growing up period where we, you think your parents are one way, right? It's kind of like growing up and you see your school teacher at school every day, and then you run into them at like the grocery store and you're like, what? They're like, what? They do stuff besides teach, right? And I think there's like this shift that we experience in young adulthood where we're like, oh, my parents really messed up on this area. They're not perfect here. They're not, and it's just this shift that can feel really uncomfortable. Well, if they're not this, then what does that mean about me? And I think that what we're talking about here with God is a similar thing in that it's like this growing up and maturing, a spiritual maturing. And he is always solid. He is always perfect. But I think that some of the messaging that we get about what it looks like and how it's going to go, like some of that can really set us up, right? Can really set us up when we're like, oh, I thought it was going to look this way. This is nothing like I thought it was going to look. So what does that mean about me? What does it mean about him? And one of the things that I've heard a lot of is it must mean that I am not good enough. It must mean that I've done something wrong. And my husband, he lost his wife to cancer. She had cancer for almost 7 years and died when she was a month shy of her 37th birthday. It was a slow, painful death, and left behind 5 kids. And, you know, she was told multiple times, like in blessings, things like that, that she was going to heal, that she was going to see her children grow up. And my husband has told me that he took that to mean that it must be me. I must not be worthy of this blessing. I must not be worthy of her healing. And it just, you know, hurt his soul. And he's done a lot of healing since then. But I think that that's a common response. Like, I must be broken. It must be me. I know that I went there for sure. Like that I must not be as lovable as women whose husbands don't do these things, who are faithful, who want to be good to them. I must just not be quite up to par. So I'd love to hear your take on that. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I think that's somebody's translation of what they see, right? Like what I see is this. This is a reality that's happening is I have a spouse who's dying or died, or I have a situation that, you know, is just wrecking me. And then that's the reality. Our translation of that is now fabricated, right? Where it's like, oh, all of a sudden we are saying in the limited wisdom that we have, I know why this is happening, you know, and it's because of worst case scenario, right? You know, we're just like, and that's that's unfair, I think. And it's really unwise, but not unexpected that somebody would do that, you know? Like I think about the disciples who are in the boat in the middle of the storm in the book of Matthew. I have just someone really close to me who opened up just this last summer to me about a really serious betrayal and letdown in his life. And it was in his closest relationships, you know, with his spouse. And then nobody was there to like support him, you know? Yeah. And he said, I went to my dad for help. And finally, my dad just kind of got sick of, I think, talking to me about it. And he said, I always grew up thinking, if I have no one else, at least I have my dad. And when my dad wasn't available anymore, he says, I turned to heaven and all I got was silence. That's all I got. You know, when I was on my last breath, my last string of hope, nothing was there. And I listened, and I did not have any answers, of course, because I can't interpret what's happening there. All I can do is mourn in the fact that that's what he was experiencing. That's what he was feeling. But a couple of days later, I was reading in the New Testament about the disciples on the boat, and they're on the boat. And when they're there in the storm, Jesus is asleep, you know? And it's like, we feel like that sometimes. We're like, I am in a storm and you are sleeping. You're sleeping through the middle of my hardest night. You're taking a nap, you know? That's what they see. And that's what they experience. And then you remember they go and they wake him up and they actually say to him 2 things. We're going to die and you don't even care. No. And neither of those 2 things were true. They were not going to die. They went to worst case scenario and they assumed the very worst about him. And what they did is they translated, because he asks a question that sounds pretty patronizing at first. He's like, why are you so afraid? And I always thought that was so patronizing. And I was like, well, why do you think? I was like, how about the fact that the boat's about to snap in two? How about the fact that I'm choking on seawater? Why do you think it seems so patronizing, until one day I actually said it out loud. I said that very question out loud to one of my kids when they woke me up in the middle of the night, and I said, why are you so afraid? And I realized then when I said it, I was like, oh my gosh, Jesus was not patronizing them. He was going to work through the fear with them. Okay, tell me what you're so afraid of. Mm-hmm. Tell me, let's talk about this. Don't you know I'm bigger than storms? Let's talk about that. You don't have to be, afraid. Those disciples translated a sleeping Jesus as one who wasn't interested, but really a sleeping Jesus is one who isn't intimidated by this. And they translated it wrong. But what I want to say is, of course they did. Of course they did, because they were in the middle of a hurricane. So naturally they did. And as I read that, I thought about my friend, and I thought, I bet no wonder you cannot see God right now or feel him, because you are in an emotional and a spiritual and a mental tailspin. And storms by nature are so blinding. I am not surprised at all that you don't sense him near and you're making these assumptions about him, because why wouldn't you, when your very life is on the line? And you know this better than anybody, that's exactly how you would describe what it feels like to be in infidelity. You're like, I'm choking, I'm drowning.
Yeah.
And if I were drowning, literally drowning in the ocean, I don't think I would notice who was on the shore. I don't think I would notice who was there helping me. Of course I wouldn't. My only thought would be, I'm trying to survive.
Yeah.
And it's like, It's not until 40 years later, after the resurrection, that Matthew writes down the Gospel of Matthew and tells that story, and is able to say, oh, Jesus was there all along. Mm-hmm. It took 40 years and the perspective of the resurrection and the cross to be able to then look back and say, oh, there you were. Mm-hmm. Now I see that you were there all along,
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you.
But that's hard. That's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
Why is every time you're in it, somebody stand up in church and say, I prayed and I found my car keys? And you're like, well, congratulations. I am so glad that God is interested in finding your stupid car keys.
Right.
And not interested in helping me survive this,
Right.
And it just, but no wonder, of course, nobody would blame. I would not blame anybody or myself in those kind of situations.
No.
I actually think that it is a tribute to the sweetness of Jesus that he says, if being angry with me is going to help your healing, then I will swallow that. Mm-hmm. I will handle that.
Yep.
But he has emotions like we do. And when we're angry with him, he feels that. But he's like, but if this is going to be how you heal, then that'll be, my nephew I was talking to yesterday, and I don't mean, he's a college athlete, and his season's about to start, and he tore his ACL in practice.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. And whose fault is that? Well, it's gravity, and it was whoever left the divot in the field, and it's not God's, it's not God's fault. Mm-mm. But blame went to God. That's what he did. he was so angry with God for not preventing it and not, and why would he let that happen if he really loved me? And some people might be listening to this. It's like, oh, buck up, little boy. That's a little trivial, but it's a really, really big deal, to him.
Sure.
And he says, I was so angry with God and I stopped praying and I stopped reading my scriptures. And he says, and I stopped wanting to just be involved with him at all. He said to me yesterday, I didn't even think about until today how heartbreaking that must have been for him, for me to stop talking, and how sweet it was for him to say, hey, I know you're really mad at me right now, and that's okay. And then he said this to me, but I've had other people who came into my life, to help me kind of understand and work through that. And he said, I think it's so sweet that even though I was so mad at God for probably an unjustified reason, he still sent messengers to me. He still sent people, almost as if he said, hey, Spence is really mad at me right now. So will you go tell him I love him? Because he doesn't want to talk to me right now.
I love that.
That is so sweet. That is so
love
sweet.
that. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. A couple thoughts come up with that. One is, okay, so sometimes, that was an accident where, right, like he fell or tripped and hurt himself, right?
Right.
Something that I see quite frequently with my clients is where the people who they think are supposed to be the helpers kind of don't show up in the way that they think. And specifically where I have seen this a lot is in church leadership, with bishops, with stake presidents, with support for the women. And oftentimes, like the men, there's programs, there's a lot of support and rallying around to help. And oftentimes the women feel like, what about me? What about me? I fortunately did not have that experience. I had amazing support. But I hear a lot of women who don't, where they feel even abandoned by the people that they've been taught will be their helpers, right? From a young age, like go talk to your bishop, go talk to your leaders, they'll help you. And so there's that element. I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
I have a little bit of anxiety about this, and I'll tell you why. Because I served as a bishop for 5 years, and it panics me sometimes to think that I may have done that to somebody, along the way. And it kind of hurts my spirit a little bit, because that never would have been my intention.
Of course.
And I'm not trying to excuse myself, but I just am like, oh my gosh, where did I mess up? What did I do? I was talking to a friend just this week, and she mentioned this very thing and said, I wish I had a different bishop. I wish I had a different relief study president. They've done nothing for me. I am here and they have done nothing. And I think that, again, she kind of went into that expecting that this is what bishops and relief study presidents are supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, what if instead it was like, wouldn't it be nice if they did,
Yeah.
Instead of like just expecting like, oh, that's what they're supposed to do. And they didn't. And unfortunately, sometimes that gets translated again to God, right? The imperfections of people get translated as, oh, then God must not care. Yep. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, he would have, inspired them or given me a leader or a friend who was more like this. And I hate to use this word, but I just don't feel like currently in my own life, I do not feel like I am entitled to any help from my bishop or from any of my neighbors or from my wife even. I'm not, I just, that's been great to let that go. Mm-hmm. And when it comes, it is such a thrill when it comes. Yeah. It's like, oh, wow. I teach a world religions class, and we talk about in Hinduism about arranged marriages. And I just let everybody let's talk about some of the benefits of an arranged marriage. Like I know you all know the benefits of a choose marriage. That's great. Let's play the benefits of an arranged one for a second. And this girl said something last week, and I was like, that's actually so interesting. She was like, I made lists every week in Young Women's about what my husband was going to be like and all these things. And she was like, I'm sort of afraid I'm going to be sorely disappointed because he will not measure up to what I just expected and hoped and thought that he was going to be. And she said, in an arranged marriage, you start with nothing. And if they brush their teeth, that is a bonus, you know?
I love it.
I was like, oh, that is so awesome. But I think there's a lot of wisdom in that and to think like, you know, please I don't want anyone to interpret this as like being insensitive to it and just saying to somebody, because if somebody has grown up with that expectation, even if it was a false expectation, it's still hurtful, you know, and I still mourn that they are hurting over that, you know, about not having that, you know, I'm not discounting the hurt. I'm trying to think of how can we prevent some of that hurt, you know, and seeing like, oh, you know what? One way that God can reach people is through church leadership, but never would I say that is the preferred way or the only way. I would just say it is a way. And Jenny likes to say to me this, she says, I am not in charge of your happiness. That's what she says to me. She was like, I actually enjoy trying to make you happy. I actually like it. So I'm going to do it in my life, just so you know, but I'm not in charge of it for you. You have got to you have to find, you know, these things.
She's a wise woman.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like that strengthened our relationship a whole lot, you know, where I'm not demanding her to be something that she didn't sign up to be or cannot be, you know, so in the same way, I want to let go of that demand for my leaders and my friends also, and just say, you know, when you come, I will be so thankful, you know, but if you don't, that's not disappointing. That's just, it is. And, you know, I really think we deal with a lot of crap in our life, but church crap is particularly painful.
Yeah. You know? Why would you say what's your thought on why? Why do you think?
I think because church is supposed to be our place where we can be vulnerable, and it is the things of our soul. And we really are in a place of like, these are things most important to me. These are things that I'm most sensitive about. And so when I'm betrayed or hurt in a church context or a family context, it's like at work, it's still hurtful, but I can deal with it a little bit better because it's work, you know? If it's the kids' sports program, there's a lot of sports crap that we deal with the kids in sports at school. And people are backstabbers there. And it's like, okay, that's hurtful, but it's like, it's sports and, you know, and whatever. When it happens in my worship, my place of worship and my community of faith, it's just like that cuts deeper, you know, in those places. But the reality is why would it not happen in those places? You know, and it just is harder. It's harder to recover from it. It's harder to like manage it. There's a lot more emotion involved. And that is why there's a lot of things, ideas and things that are like just irreconcilable. Right? Let's take somebody who's LGBTQ. And we have these two doctrines, one of chastity and marriage. And one of acceptance and love of all. And I cannot figure out how to bridge that gap. You know? But I've learned that my job's not necessarily to bridge that gap, but just to love somebody and practice the Christian virtues of patience and faith and hope and love, right?
Mhm.
And I think those virtues are so powerful to just like, in the meantime, right? We're going to find ourselves in the meantime a lot, right?
Yes, 100%. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about, a vulnerable piece for me that's been very personal. And speaking about church things like that, the church things can sometimes cut the deepest. It feels very personal. Is, for people who are listening who are not members of my faith, we place everything. It's about being sealed eternally, eternal families, being with your spouse forever. Like there's everything in our church. It's a big deal. It's something that's foundational to our doctrine. And I was sealed, and it did not go the way that I thought it would. And where I have struggled and really gotten to that, and in the meantime place, is in kind of going, where do I fit in here? Where do I fit in? Because I'm married to a widower who he was married and sealed to his first wife. And so for me, it's like, where's my place? Like, where's my own person that's mine? And anyway, there's just parts about what we're taught about the doctrine and things like that just I haven't quite figured out, right? That I haven't quite come to a peaceful place of understanding. But I will tell you, like, where I have found peace with it, when in the things that I just don't have an answer to, of like what it's going to look like I'm still sealed to my first husband, is in going, there's just things I do not know, that I might not be privy to yet, that I might not be ready for. And I remember early on in our marriage really struggling with this, just feeling like if he died today, he would go, according to what we teach, he'd be with her, and like, what about me? What about me? Right? It was really painful. I was in a lot of pain. And this understanding that we're really here to learn how to love. That's really what we're here to do, is to learn how to love, to learn how to become this version of ourselves that then can let go of some of these outcomes that we so desperately want, and learn how to love in a way that transcends the outcomes that we just have to know, right? Yeah. And so that's where I have felt peace and kind of been able to let that go, and going, I'm open for further information, but I don't need it to feel peaceful now. Like, I'm okay. I can hang out in the meantime, kind of just going, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I'm okay. Like, just loving him, getting better at loving myself, loving God, and trusting the process, trusting that there's things that I just do not know yet.
Right. Yeah. And I just think there is a lot of confusion, and you came from a hurtful situation, and it's just like, oh, let's not add to the hurt, by like getting hurt over things that we don't know. You can't take away all the hurt, and you can't take away the confusion, but you can take away the hurt that comes from assumption. Someone asked me last night, I'm afraid I'm going to miss my chance to get married. And then God's going to say, well, I gave you a chance and you blew it and you missed it. So sorry, you're not going to get that. And she says, I'm so afraid of that. And I said, pause for just a second. Can you imagine in your mind's eye the Jesus who approached the leper, a leper who had not been touched or hugged or given a goodnight kiss to for who knows how many years, who'd been an outcast, who had to wear a bell so that no one would come near him. And Jesus walks up to him, and with every mode in your imagination possible to heal him, the magic words, waving a wand, of all the ways he chose to heal that leper, it was with a touch. It's such a tender, sweet scene. And I said to her, can you imagine that same Jesus ever using the words to you, well, sorry, you missed out? I was like, that's not the God I believe in. The one that you are painting a picture of is not the one that I believe in. I just don't,
Yeah.
When I talk about Jesus coming to the world again, I get excited because I know it's the Jesus who healed the leper and forgave the thief on the cross and was so tender with the woman in adultery and stopped during the middle of his busy day to kneel down with the woman with the issue of blood. Like, that's the Jesus that is coming back. That's the one that's going to handle the problems. It's like, I know that's one of the beauties of the New Testament and the mortal ministry of Jesus is it shows us better than any other place what his character and nature is actually like. I was like, do you want to know what God is like? Let me show you a picture of that. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And Paul says the greatest revelation of the character and nature of God is Jesus on the cross. It is a self-sacrificing, meek, could have obliterated the mountainside with a snap of his fingers, but forgives and takes care of, and just that is the picture of what God is like. And there is this Bible scholar who coined this phrase I loved so much. He says, we ought to go through life with cross vision. When we make assumptions about God, we need to make them in context of the cross. Is this God I'm creating in my mind look like that same God who laid down his life in that manner for me? And if they do not reconcile with each other, the cross wins out, because that's the best revelation of who God is and what he's like. Like, that is a God who's for me, who would give all for my life. So if what I'm assuming about him doesn't match up with that, then there's something missing in the story, right? I don't quite have it right. That scene on the cross has got to be the ugliest, most horrific, and nastiest scene in all of Scripture, right?
Yeah.
But there are people who have crosses on their walls and wear them around their necks. I do. I think that image of the cross is so beautiful and so hopeful. And it's like, that is wild that what I first saw as ugly is actually beautiful. And I think one day, if we have a picture of ugliness about God, once we get some more information, we'll realize it was actually a picture of beauty. What I thought was a picture of betrayal and defeat was actually a picture of love and victory. I just needed more time, with it. Yeah. And I love that idea of living my life with cross vision. That is what God is actually like.
That's so powerful. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're running out of time. I wish we could just keep talking, but I want to go to one thing that I was thinking, what about our kids? This is something that I think our own feeling of betrayal when we're in those, when we're feeling like we're drowning, right? When we're like suffering and hurting. And something that I hear, and that was the hardest part for me personally, by far the hardest part, it was watching my babies hurt and knowing I couldn't do anything about it. And making these decisions and leading our own lives and taking charge of our lives, knowing full well that our kids, like I ended my marriage. I knew that my kids were going to have divorced parents, and it was brutal. It was very, very hard for me. And I had this understanding that it was a gift from God. It was very clearly given to me that it was part of their journey, and that I basically needed to stand aside and trust. And it was really, really hard, even though I had that trust. So I'd love you to share your thoughts about that. Like, as things happen to us, watching our kids struggle, watching them hurt, and what you would say to help strengthen ourselves so we can strengthen our children.
Well, I think there is something that we like to do sometimes, and that's to paint a really great picture and not let anybody else into like the messiness of, our lives. We do that all over, and it's probably socially acceptable in most circles and stuff like that, right? Like put on a smile at the grocery store and at church, and this is what we do, and everything. And it's actually like, you hear this all the time, that like people will go to church together and they will say, well, all those people have it all put together, and I'm the only one who has the mess of my life. And I think it would be a tragedy if my kids grew up thinking mom and dad always had it put together. And they just were strong enough. They were whatever enough. I would rather my kids see how desperately I need to rely on the grace of God. Like that is what I want them to learn, is like the only reason your mom and I are making it is because we're relying on the love and mercy and grace of God. And I want you need to know that. I don't want you to see just put together, Dad. Yep. I want you to see where I struggle and what I do when I struggle. And I want you to see where I go for my strength and where I go for my renewal, because you will need to do that also in your life. And we have a phrase in our faith, if you're not a member of our faith tradition, that we like to tell people to become self-reliant. And I actually hate the phrase, because I was like, wait, I think we want to be God-reliant people. And I think what the phrase means is I know where to go for help. Right. But I not only think it's a good idea, I actually feel obligated to teach my children where to go in their times of doubt and in their times of struggle, and what to do when you feel like, I want to be vocal about that to them. I want to tell them, you guys, not when they're 5, there's ways to do it, but like I've got a 16-year-old and he's got to know that like, oh, I question my faith. And when I do, this is what I ask, and this is what I say, and this is what I've learned is helpful. I just feel like it opens up the opportunities to really teach our kids the lessons that they need to know.
Oh, that's so powerful. Yes, because then they're prepared. They're prepared, and they don't have that false expectation that, well, mom and dad seemed like they had it all put together, so I guess that I should too. And if I don't, then what does that mean about me? Right.
And nobody knows how to think through things and analyze their assumptions. Like we don't come with that gift. Like we don't come with that ability. But I've learned some things, and it would be great to teach it to the kids. Like, listen, I'm so mad, but when I think about it, I'm learning this, and I need to think about this. And, anyways, it's an opportunity to help them work through it when they need to work through it, and prevent some of like the hurt I brought into my own life because of expectations and assumptions.
Yep. Exactly. Not adding more pain.
Right. Some of that is avoidable. Pain is not avoidable. Right. Not avoidable. Right. But some pain is,
To me, the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is not avoidable, but we can pile on all kinds of unnecessary suffering when we have false expectations.
Yeah. And I really, really believe this, that I said that I'd served as a bishop, and people would come a lot with their problems. And sometimes I would be so frustrated by it because I wouldn't know how to fix it. And I got some advice from a friend who just said, why are you trying to carry a burden that is Jesus's to carry? That's not your job.
Right.
Your job is to breathe hope and to encourage. Yeah. And to, and be there as support. And I know that about my kids too. Like I cannot fix some of the things I want to fix. That's frustrating, but I don't need to carry the burden of trying to fix it or save them. The job of Savior has already been taken.
Mm-hmm.
And he does better at it.
Yes, he does. He does. And back to your wise wife's, what she said to you is, I'm not responsible for your happiness, right? It's not my job. It's not my job to make you make you happy. And I think that we have these expectations on ourselves that we are in charge of every experience that our kids have. And that's a pretty heavy burden to place at our own feet, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, listen, I'm just going to love you like wildly and bigly. And that's my job, is to do that. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to teach you and I'm going to support you. But I'm just not going to be responsible for things I cannot control or be responsible for.
Right. Yep. I love that. Well, to wrap up, I'm wondering if you can share one more thing. But you mentioned earlier about the apostles that were in the boat in the storm, feeling like they were going to die. I know that there's people listening to this right now, or who are going to listen to this, that are that person, that are feeling like they might die at any time. And where is he? And I'd love to hear what you'd have to say to them about riding out that storm and hanging in.
I think I would do what they did. And they woke up Jesus. And they brought him into their story. And for people that will look differently, for some people, they will bring him in through music and through meditation, through therapy, through lunch with friends. They will just, I would say, wake him up, wake up support, don't just weather it, go to the places that have been good places of that help and strength for you, whatever they are. And know that waking him up didn't end the storm immediately, but I think they were able to endure the storm for just a second. They almost kind of forgot the storm was happening, and it's and I just feel like, just wake him up and get your eyes off of the problem and onto him. We can obsess over the storm so much. And it's get your eyes on him. Let his goodness shake you, and not not your fears. And I think I would just do what they did, and just storms are storms, and you're trying to weather them. There's a reason for saying I'm trying to weather this storm.
Right.
I'm just making it through. And I think instead of asking the question, why did this happen? And why did it happen to me? Because those will intensify the storm. But rather to ask this question, okay, what do you want me to do next? And what do you want me to learn from this? Not that he caused it, but there's still something I might be able to learn. So we just got to switch that little question that can be so aggravating. The question of why can be so aggravating. And once we let that go, I'm not going to ask it anymore. I'm not going to ask it anymore. I'm not going to assume answers to that. The only helpful question to ask right now is, okay, how do I get through this? What should I do next? And is there something I can learn from this?
Yep. Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. That was a wonderful conversation. I wish we had all day long. There's so much more we could talk about.
and let me just throw in this one thought. It just keeps coming back to my head the whole time. And then it's going to be so random, and then we can end. And I think all of the trouble and heartache and storms we experience are evidence that not that there isn't a savior, but that we need a savior. That's the reason he was sent, is because life would be filled with heartache and betrayal and struggle and trouble. Imperfect people are not evidence that Christianity isn't working. They are evidence for the need of Christianity, the need for forgiveness, the need for redemption, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The title we love most for Jesus are titles that mean fixer, redeemer, right? And that's because we're broken and our world is broken and we break it more. And so we call him in. We call him in not to be a preventer, but to be a redeemer of it.
Yep. Thank you. That's so good. So good. I can't wait to go back and listen to all this, because there are multiple times where I'm over here trying not to cry. So I can listen later and let it all out. It's so beautiful, so powerful, so beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate it. I know my listeners will love this. Thank you for listening to the Heal from Infidelity podcast. If you would like to be kept in the know about upcoming free classes, new podcast episodes, and other ways of working with me, go subscribe to my weekly email. You can subscribe at andreagiles.com/lies-about-infidelity/. Again, it's andreagiles.com/lies-about-infidelity/. I will see you next time.